This episode is brought to you by Paramount Plus. If you don't already subscribe to Paramount Plus, please use our affiliate link by going to talkthroughmedia.com/Paramount Plus. Using our affiliate link gives us a little credit, which helps us to keep bringing you great content. U.S. residents only.
Hello, and welcome to episode 13 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Talk Through. I'm Brian.
And I'm LT.
And today we'll be covering season 2, episode 3, titled Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And we're recording this a week late just because we couldn't get things lined up after the holiday. But we're going to record kind of back to back. I don't know if we'll get to episode 4 today, but hopefully maybe we'll do it tomorrow. I don't know. We'll see. Tomorrow. Anyway, before we get started, we want to remind you that we now provide early access to a virtually uncensored version of the podcast. And it goes out anywhere from 1 to 3 days ahead of everything else. And that was very much the case with the last episode. And you hear a little more sausage, although I don't know. I think I may literally do that this time and just release whatever we record here.
Well, we haven't been horrifically sausagey of late.
No, we haven't been, thankfully. So
we're consummate professionals.
Now you can get early access, and if we do have any sausage, you'll be able to, put some salt and pepper on it and eat it with your eggs. Just go to patreon.com/Star Trek TTM to sign up. It's as little as $1 a month will get you access. So, and we appreciate all of you Patreon supporters for supporting us, and we're glad to be recording the podcast on a regular basis again. So, yeah. All right. So we have, before we get started on this week's episode, we got some feedback about the podcast from last week covering season 2, episode 2, Ad Astra per Aspera. So let's open hailing frequencies. All right, we got some feedback on the podcast, not on the episode per se, from Jeff X-Force 11. So, LT, why don't you read that one?
I shall. So Jeff says, LT, I love your pound cake versus soft serve argument. Picard season 3, the best out of the Picard run. I agree with different types of Trek. That's why I'm so pissed at Paramount for offloading and canceling Prodigy. We need a different kind of Star Trek in our lives. Prodigy appealed to kids, but was a love letter to Voyager, kind of like Picard was to TNG. But I'm saying, for me, as far as TV Trek in this era is concerned, it would be Strange New World season 1, Picard season 3, Prodigy season 1 as my top 3.
All right, cool. I know Discovery probably season 2 would be in there for me, in my top 3, but I'd also have to put Lower Decks in there, probably season 3 or maybe season 2. Yeah, it's hard. I don't know if I could even do a top 3 right now. Just
it's way too hard to pick favorites.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's it's hard to pick favorites. I would say that my least favorite of the new ones was Picard season 1, I think. And Picard season 2, Picard seasons 1 and 2. And it's funny because they were very choppy, and the parts that I loved, I really loved in both seasons. The problem that I had was kind of the follow through, the ending of both seasons, and
yes,
yeah. But those are good choices. I don't know if I'd put Prodigy in my top 3. I really do enjoy the show, but I don't think I'd put it in my top 3. But I will say I love it, and I think it was a mistake for Paramount to do what they did. But hopefully it will find a home somewhere, and maybe at some point come back to Paramount Plus. But I don't know, it's short sighted. But we talked about it.
And we have some non-Trek but related news of streaming world for later. So
okay. All right. So let's move into it. Season 2, episode 3 is titled Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. It was written by, I believe he's a consulting producer, David Reed, and directed by Amanda Rowe. The description from ParamountPlus.com is as follows. La'an travels back in time to 21st century Earth to prevent an attack which will alter humanity's future history and bring her face to face with her own contentious legacy. The star date was 1518.8. It aired June 29th, 2023, with a runtime of 1 hour, 1 minute, and 1 second. LT, what did you give Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow?
So this week, I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. Never trust photographers in beanies.
All right. So we have a pattern here where your ratings are going down with each episode. So,
yes, they are.
Yeah. My rating is also down, and this is the lowest rating for an episode of this show, but I still gave it a 9. Wibbly wobbly timey wimey. And it was the timeline things about the episode that I liked the least. So
yes.
Yeah.
And we will talk about that.
We sure will. All right. So let's move on to our yeses.
Yes.
And in case we want to do that.
Now we're talking.
Yes, we are.
All right, LT. What do you have for your yeses?
All right. Well, I'm going to start off with the whole New York, Toronto gag that they pulled. That if you didn't know, apparently they shoot a lot of movies in Toronto where Toronto stands in for New York City.
Yes.
So whenever, Kirk said, "No, we're in New York," and Lon said, "No, we're in Toronto. It used to be Canada." That I have a couple of Canadian friends who work downtown who are always joking about, yeah, you really don't know what's going on, and you figure that they're shooting a movie because they'll see New York City police cars and American mailboxes.
Yeah.
And one of the other jokes that somebody made was that they actually had to put signs out that they had put a bunch of trash bags and things on this one street. And the Toronto Department of City Works came and cleaned it up. So they had to redress the set and put signs out and said, "This is for a movie. Please don't take away our trash."
That's funny.
And one of the other comments was, again, some of my Canadian acquaintances were amused that they saw familiar places as they were doing the episode. It's like, I know where that is. I know where that is.
Yeah, I had the exact same reaction to it. So,
in the place formerly known as Canada.
Yeah, I mean, I lived in Toronto for 6 years, so and lived downtown for a good portion of that. So I'm very aware of where they shoot. I was walking distance away from Eaton Center, and for some of that time, and actually most of that time. And it was great to see Canada, specifically Toronto, front and center in this episode. It was, not standing in as some alien landscape, not standing in as New York or some other big city.
But Toronto, Toronto.
Yeah, that was really good to see. So,
well, my next point is it's going to be a yes, and it's probably going to be a no, but it's another time travel episode. For folks that have just come on board to the podcast, and some of you old heads will remember me saying it, that I generally have problems with time travel episodes. I actually enjoyed this one a bit. I have problems with it, of course, but as far as part of the shtick, I kind of thought it was nice that they ended up, in the 21st century, and we could see them shenanigan around in Toronto. And it was done okay. I'm not going to give them a complete pass on it, but for the most part, it was not a bad time travel episode.
I would agree.
Another one of my yeses is that I'm really beginning to warm up to Paul Wesley as Kirk.
Yeah.
Now, I know last season we'd made some comments about him. I will definitely say that this time we could see him playing Kirk. He was Kirkier than he was the last time we saw him.
I agree.
And as someone has said, he's not William Shatner and he's not Chris Pine, but I think given the opportunity, I think that he is going to be able to fit into the role.
Yeah.
That this time, I think we had commented before that he didn't quite have the air. He didn't quite have the swagger. He didn't quite have the Kirk chops. It's what we were talking about last season. And I think I saw him be more Kirk this time. And I know it's a different guy and he's going to have his own take on it. And like I just said, he's not Shatner. He's not Chris Pine. And even though I had a lot of issues with how Pine played him, you could still argue that he was existentially Kirk.
Yeah.
He had some of the right personality traits. It was just different because the circumstances were different.
Yeah. And you could also say that, some of it may have been Kirk is different because the timeline is different and he grew up differently and, wasn't born in Iowa. He was born on the Kelvin.
He was born on Iowa.
Right. And his, father wasn't around and, so he maybe had some rough edges to him that maybe, the Shatner Kirk didn't have, but at the same time, he did have, some of the swagger. Now, Paul Wesley's Kirk that we saw didn't have the same kind of swagger, but I saw more of it this episode. And, when we saw the little thing at the end, I felt even a little more of that. So, and I liked what I heard on the Ready Room for that episode. And I say for that episode because we're recording it after we've both seen season 2, episode 4. The discussion about he mentioned that we're going to see more of the Kirk that we know as the season goes on. And that's fantastic. I think that's a good way to kind of bring him in. But you also have to remember that except for that little, view screen part on La'an's iPad, of course it's not an iPad, but you know what I mean? We haven't seen the Kirk that we know, like the timeline that we know, which I will have some things to talk about in a minute. We haven't seen that Kirk yet. So I'm okay with him being a little different. But like I said, he's more Kirk in this episode, and
Right.
I didn't have any problems with his portrayal this episode at all.
And one of the things I thought was interesting, and I think it came up in the Ready Room, is that Paul Wesley's apparently talked to Shatner some.
Yeah.
So that makes me feel better
Yeah.
that it's a different guy. We know that. But I think that if he's talking to Shatner, then, who knows? Maybe he can pick up some tips.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, I'm just going to leave it with I'm warming up to him. And one of the things that I thought was really fun this episode was the whole deal with chess as a Kirk thread.
Yeah.
That, we know Kirk was a chess player. We know that's part of his personality. And the fact that they were able to weave that in, and we know from previous episodes of the original series that he and Spock played chess, and apparently played chess quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was the fact that they could weave that in there. And I thought it showed more of the Kirk we expect. And it gave Wesley an opportunity to get in there and kind of be more Kirky for us. So I enjoyed that. For the most part, it was interesting the way they pulled this off. Now, like I said, I've got some more things to say about the time travel bits of it later, but as a whole, I mean, I like what he did. I thought he's wearing into the part, and I'm looking forward to see what he does later with it. And just to finish up my yeses, definitely chops for, Christina Chong.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the way she plays Lon.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I liked her first season, and this gave us a little more depth, a little more, we've gotten more insights into that character, and I enjoyed her part in all the stuff in Toronto.
Yeah. Yeah, I will second that. I think that she was great in the role this week. This is an opportunity on the Ready Room that they didn't take advantage of. Hopefully she'll be on there another week, but I thought she was great. I thought that we got to see some of that tough exterior kind of melt away. You could see that she has her guard up a lot, and Kirk seemed to be able to shed that. And at the end, the scene, where she cries after talking to the actual 2260 Kirk, I thought was really, it was really well played, well written, well acted, just a good part of the story that I didn't see that cry coming, but but I really enjoyed that part of it. Is that all you have?
That is.
Okay. I mean, we've basically talked about pretty much everything that I wanted to say. Just reiterating the whole Toronto thing. It was so good to see Toronto front and center, and watching it and seeing things that, I mean, I haven't been back in Toronto in 19 years. It's been that long, but seeing places that I could recognize, that Root store, I've been in that store. I've been in Eaton Center. I've been, where there was one part where it showed, was it Royal Alexandra Hall? I think, I've been there. I'm looking, oh, there's Queen Street, oh, there's the, City Hall. There's, it was a few places downtown that were shown. I saw Ryerson as well. That's one of the universities that's downtown. In fact, I used to live right next to it. So anyway, it was kind of cool to see all of that. And I enjoyed that part of it. I love time travel episodes. This one wasn't my favorite time travel episode, which we'll get into, but I enjoyed that part of it. I thought that the Sarah was her name, I think, the Romulan, agent, whatever. I thought she was good as well, and I have something in the notes about her. But anyway, I enjoyed this episode, even though I give it the lowest rating that I've had of the series, and so did LT. But I will talk about why in a minute. All right, so let's move on to our nose.
No!
Or we will make that our official one.
Okay.
All right. LT, what do you have for nose?
Well, for my first no, it's another time travel episode.
Yeah.
It just seems to be, I don't want to say it's a crutch, but they had kind of a ham-fisted-ish time travel episode in Picard, and I don't know. It just, there were too many coincidences, I guess, and it just, time travel episodes are kind of a fine line with me, and it was just not all there. I guess the big thing is, so they played enough chess. He played enough chess to make enough money that they could buy a hot dog, get a hotel room, buy enough gas for the car that they dragooned to get to Vermont. Obviously, they're playing high stakes chess to make enough money to do that.
Yeah.
Because it always ends up that money ends up being the thing that is a major issue for time travel episodes. Since, you come from the future and you don't have any money, that you've got to have money to function in the 20th of the 21st century. I mean, I like the fact that she was able to find Pelia, but I just was it wasn't quite what I expected. So we know that she's just some kind of antique store art thief, collectibles hoarder in the 21st century. So I guess in the time frame that after Lon left and through the eugenics war and whatever, she took a yen to become an engineer.
Yeah.
Which I guess if you live forever and you've got time on your hands, you can figure those things out.
Yeah.
But that was just kind of, it was a necessary plot point, but it was just kind of not super well done, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I don't really think that there was any need to make her a non-engineer in this time frame. Like, I don't know. I think that.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. It worked out, but it's still, the more I thought about it, the more it bothered me, kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So it had to be Lon.
Yeah.
But it just seemed kind of random that Mr. Temporal Agent would bloop onto the deck of the Enterprise in front of the person exactly he needed to grab.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to tell me that the magic time travel box knew where she was, and he knew that he had to find her because reasons. It just seemed kind of, oh, well, this is the person we have to have because it's all going to dovetail in nicely. That it just seemed like when he made his magical appearance, it just happened to be in front of her, who happened to be the right person, who happened to be the one who could get into the facility with her handprint.
Mm-hmm.
It just seemed like it was a little random for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they didn't really explain it better. So it just was kind of it had to be her, so it had to be her. And I couldn't let it go. But so I did have a little problem with the cop scene.
Mm.
Only because I really doubt, just because somebody wanted to run their mouth and take pictures, that they would have said, okay, sorry, we'll let you go now.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because I would say, don't try that at home, kids.
Yeah,
just from my experience, it would have been, you've got plenty of backup. You send somebody over there to handle the photographer, and everybody else would continue to do the handcuffing and stuffing and taking them down to ask questions on why they were driving a car that weren't theirs and why they don't have ID and all those sorts of things. It just seemed to be rather a convenient plot contrivance for again, I don't think she was wearing the beanie this time, but our rando photographer to come in and introduce herself into the situation and make everybody go away.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on this. It definitely was a contrivance, and it just didn't need to do that, you know.
And so, and I'm not going to know her, but I'm probably going to not good enough our Romulan agent. But as far as hard nose, that's really about all I've got. Like I said, it's the fact that one of the problems I have with time travel episodes is that it just seems like there's a lot of, well, of course it had to be Lon. So of course Lon's the one that the guy showed up in front of, because everything wouldn't have worked if it hadn't been her. And the fact that she drugged Kirk along was just random circumstance.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's really all I've got for nose.
Yeah. Well, I would say there's actually some things that I would want to add to my yeses, and I'll just now I'm thinking about it that I didn't say and I didn't write down, but I'll just say it really quick. I liked when we saw this Enterprise. It had a different plaque. It wasn't the USS Enterprise. It was the UEF Enterprise, I believe. So, United Earth Fleet, I believe is what it was called, instead of the Starfleet. So I think that's what the plaque said. But anyway.
Well, the if you wanted to argue, the canonical pre-Starfleet was the United Earth Space Navy.
Right.
So it was like UESN.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, I thought that like seeing things like, so that little peek of the alternate history, where we see like Spock captaining a Vulcan ship, them being at war with the Romulans. Those darn Romulans, there's so much trouble. And of course, like in this timeline, Lon hasn't seen a Romulan because they haven't, there hasn't been contact with the Romulans. Anyway, subtle things like seeing Spock, how the Romulans are there, seeing things like, Uhura is in the same, spot, but, what's her name? Ortegas was at a different station, but still on the Enterprise. I think there's an opportunity there that they could have, brought in like McCoy and Scotty, just as an aside, but I liked what they did with that. So anyway, just wanted to mention that, since I didn't mention it in my nose. Kirk picked up driving pretty damn fast for someone who had never even been on Earth. you know?
Mhm.
So I've got to bring that up. The fact that, we have this messing with the timeline, and, I first of all, like, we have, this is a similar time frame as we saw, what's her name on Picard season 2. I can't remember her Romulan name, but it wasn't Laris. It was the one that looked like Laris.
Right.
Anyway, I can look it up at some point here, but she would have picked up, things that would have happened, because that's kind of what she does, or was, as a not a traveler, but as a, I can't remember the name, what they called themselves. Anyway, like Gary Seven,
Right.
Observing the timeline, make sure everything was going the way that it did. Surely she would have seen some way to get involved here. So the fact that she did not, I thought that was an opportunity missed.
Or maybe because this is a different timeline, that didn't happen.
Yeah, perhaps. I really would have wished that they just left the whole augmented timeline alone. Like, I appreciate the fact that, with the temporal Cold War and all that stuff, the timelines, but now, it just confuses things. I mean, it's like, so essentially, I guess we're not watching the predecessor to TOS, because this is a different timeline, and you've got a Khan now who wasn't, at war in 1992. Suddenly it's 2022 and he's a boy. So it wasn't just 30 years off. It was, 50 years off or 60 years off, because, he's a boy, not a man in 1992. He was not even conceived yet. So, like, okay, I get the whole timeline thing. It was a good way to, establish it, but there was another way that they could have done this. They could have just time traveled into 1992, right? Like, I don't really understand why they had to come back to present day Toronto. They could have done everything they needed to in Toronto, but just make it, a slightly, period piece, and make it the 90s, so there's that. And that's the biggest reason why I had a problem with this episode. I think that it was just confusing to do that, and we'll have more to talk about it in the Not Good Enoughs. But
oh yes, we will.
Yeah, and we might as well just segue right into it. But yeah, so this is both a no and a not good enough. So let's get into the not good enough, shall we?
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough!
Or
that is not what I suggested.
And it wasn't what I suggested. So LT,
No.
let's get on with it.
All right. So you noted I not good enough that is the whole sliding time scale with the eugenics war.
Yeah.
And there have been a lot of people who have made a lot of hay over this, gone in and said, well, they're screwing with established canon. And part of the reason why is they're really having trouble separating our time with whatever time Star Trek said.
Exactly.
And
they're trying to course correct it based
Right.
on the fact that the things that have been established in the timeline in the Star Trek
50 years ago
are not valid anymore. And to that, I would have said, that's fine. Just go with it. Like, but I guess they don't. I understand that approach for them not wanting to do that. People that are like, for one thing, okay, it makes it so that you don't have to have watched TOS to watch this show. There's a lot of people that don't like watching TOS because it's outdated, specifically with, certain things in the show. Like, for example, it was established that women couldn't be a captain, which is terrible. And, but unfortunately it was one of those things from the 60s. Just the whole, anyway.
I was going to say the problem you ran into, and this is part of the deal, is nobody in the 60s expected that Star Trek would be a thing now, probably. And so
Exactly.
they wanted to pick a future date of somewhere that was far enough ahead that it could be the future, but not so far in the future that it was improbable.
Right.
So the problem is, once you start, jiggling the dates around, then you start running into problems with, what about the bell rights? What about all this other stuff that supposedly happened when it happened?
Right.
And so there've been a lot of discussion about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the really hardcore canonistas that are, on their soapboxes, waving their torches, saying this is wrong, 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 and you can't do that. You're breaking canon, you're destroying everything that Star Trek has been built upon, bloody, 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 and being really, being really angry about it.
Mm.
And I can see that. I can go with that. I could be down with that.
Yeah.
Except we're back to freaking time travel episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say, well, maybe it's the Romulans' fault. Maybe because they sent agents back, they screwed the timeline up. And so now this is the way the timeline is. The thing that I did notice is that, Terry Matalas actually weighed in on it.
I'd like to hear about this, because I didn't see that.
He did. And part of his thing was, we know that there was going to be a war. We know there was a horrific, World War III cataclysmic nuclear event. And what he was saying was, well, how do we know what the dates actually were? That because the war records were screwed up, and maybe they were guessing, and maybe there was some dates that were not firm and hard as we would have expected them to be, because of, damage post-war and records and all the chaos and all the problems. And we know that there were issues going on in Earth with society as a whole because of the whole thing. If you want to go to the next step, is you look at First Contact. It's not like the Vulcans showed up in downtown Toronto and dropped the tailgate on their ship and said, hello, Earth people.
Mm-hmm.
That if you believe First Contact, it's a bunch of refugees in Montana.
Right.
So you can still sort of play fast and loose with some of that. The problem is, once you start shifting one thing, you run into the whole Jenga block issue.
Yeah.
That some of these dates, are contingent on the next date and are contingent on the next date. And if you start trying to push things forward and move things around, then, what are we going to do in another 50 years if we still have TV shows?
Right.
I mean, part of what they were saying from the show perspective was, we couldn't really have things now that were historical then, that happened in the past or our past, because we know that there was not a ship capable of space travel to take, Khan into the future in 1996.
Right.
But it's still, like you said, once you start yanking out dates that were already established and have kind of been what it was, then you start running into the whole argument of, well, is this still really the prime timeline?
And that's
have we established a new timeline because of what Strange New Worlds have done?
I think at this point we have to, because it's just, it doesn't, I mean, and some of it I'm okay with. Like, for example, this means that they don't have to make the Enterprise look like the old Enterprise in 6 years.
But then that still goes, why did the USS New Jersey at the Starfleet Museum look like the old Enterprise? See? It's the cascade effect of unintended consequences.
Yeah.
That I don't want to get on the bandwagon of beating my chest and saying, we cannot change canon. Canon is immutable. Canon is set in stone.
Yeah.
Because as you and I have discussed on previous occasions, even if you look at what TOS did in 3 years, they played fast and loose with their own canon that they were establishing. And there are discrepancies and dates don't match and things don't line up.
Right.
It's just, we arbitrarily over the years, and to steal one of Larry Nemechek's things, during the fallow years, from the end of TAS up until the movie, there was a lot of recalculating and moving around, and nothing was really, it was established, but there were things that were still kind of ambiguous.
Yeah.
And this is where we're at, though, as a fandom. And I don't know, I'm sort of torn. I want to say that this is one of the reasons that I have a problem when people start jacking with canon with the showrunners. But I mean, I love Strange New Worlds. I love the fact we're getting new Star Trek. And this is the problem when you start telling Star Trek stories, is that some of this has to be, you have to have some flexibility in there. And I agree with you. Could they have done something different? Possibly.
Yeah.
But, are we going to say, oh, well, this was caused by the temporal incursion that the Romulans did, because we know they had agents in there, and this was something that, as long as the timeline corrected itself enough to minimize disturbances downrange, that, the Temporal Observation Corps or whoever from the far, far future that is back in our past mucking with things, maybe it all corrected enough that they said, well, okay, so there's some things that changed, but for the most part, all the other major dates. And that goes back to whose theory of temporal mechanics do you believe? Is that, I've always been sort of in the temporal inertia school, that there are certain things you could change in the past that wouldn't really affect anything out the other end.
Yeah.
That there are some small things that would happen. And it goes back to, well, is this person temporally significant?
Yeah.
Like in Picard, we knew that his ancestor was important, but, maybe one of those mooks that was at the show, his ancestors never really did anything of any significance other than live their lives and have kids and go to work and do their job. So if they get killed, well, sorry.
Yeah.
It'll affect your great grandchildren, but as far as the timeline as a whole, everything's good. The problem that I've always had with the people that are like the butterfly effect, you change one thing in somebody's life in Poughkeepsie and the future collapses. I guess I sort of have a problem with that. But I don't know. Again, this is why LT doesn't like time travel episodes. because especially for something like this, it creates a cascade effect of questions.
Yeah. I mean, my main thing is that they still could have done a time travel episode that dealt with the same things and made it a period piece and, had it so that the Romulan was trying to kill an adult Khan.
Right.
Versus, a boy Khan. And the fact that it was, why did they pick to make Khan just a boy in Toronto? I mean,
and I actually have an answer for that.
Okay.
We can blame season 2 of Picard.
Okay.
Because of the intervention of Q and all the stuff that happened with Picard. I think that it changed the Soong intervention to start doing his eugenics work. That somehow, I'm thinking that somehow with everything that happened with Q, the upshot is it didn't happen when it was supposed to have happened. That merely the fact that Q did what he did changed something as a precursor for Soong to do his research, so that the research for the Khan thing was delayed and it didn't happen when it was supposed to have happened. And this is sort of the ramification of that. Again, coming out the other side, everything happened as it was supposed to have. It just didn't happen when it originally happened.
Right. Yeah.
And that is the best answer that I can give you, because again, once you start pulling at the blocks at the base of the tower, these are the things that happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I said I had a big problem with this episode that I think on the second watch, I tempered somewhat after listening to Fantastic Geeks interpretation on it, their podcast, where they didn't really have any problem with it at all. And I understood their explanations for it. And, some of that is valid. I mean, like some of the things that were in TOS, I think need changing. And for that part, I'm okay with, but I don't know. They could have, more things changed than what we see, right? It wasn't just, she waited 30 years because Khan was an adult in 1992. He and his, his people, took over big portions of Asia, I believe, and started the eugenics war. So why that would cause that, I just don't know. It's just not something that I think was a good thing to do. But
well, I told you, I'm blaming Q from season 2 of Picard.
I think that's a good explanation for it.
And see, I listen to Trek Cultures. I think it's Trek Culture, but it was Sean Farrick.
Yes, Trek Culture, yeah.
And he had some things to say about it.
Yeah.
And like you said, I think that whether you took it as they hit Cannon with a hammer or just bent it carefully, I think that we have to realize that there is all these great ideas the writers have that change things have impacts.
Yeah. I agree. All right. So that's it for our not good enough section. We kind of beat a dead horse.
Yes, we did.
So let's move on to our feedback section and open hailing frequencies. All right. So we've got a voicemail from our good friend, Jeff X Force 11.
Well, hello, Star Trek fans. It's Jeff, X-Force 11, leaving my feedback about Strange New Worlds tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Wow. I knew that we were going to get a Kirk episode, and seeing his interaction with Lon was very cool. Now, we've got to take into account it was a different version of Kirk. And I think maybe a better version of Kirk, but I think this was very interesting. I love the time travel aspect, the strangers stuck in time and them going to get info from them, the whole Romulan aspect of things. And I thought it was just an interesting story. I thought it was fun too when Kirk confused Toronto for New York City, Times Square, since so much of TV is filmed in Canada. And I just thought this was an interesting episode of Leon confronting her past and realizing it's part of what makes her who she is, even though she's not proud of it. And I just think it was an interesting take on things. And I think a bold move for the third episode in the season, but I really enjoyed it. All right, those are my thoughts. X-Force is out.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff, X-Force 11, for your feedback yet again. Good observations.
And thank you for, even though we've officially decreed the streak is still alive, thank you for your feedback.
Yes. So, one thing I just jotted down while I was listening to that is you said a better version of Kirk. I think I would like to hear you elaborate on that. So maybe when we record episode 5, since we're recording episode 4 right after this, maybe we can hear your observations on that. And I don't think he's in episode 5. We know he wasn't in episode 4. But like to hear you elaborate on that a little bit. Yeah, I mean, maybe less of a womanizer. I don't know. But again, I think we talked about it quite a bit yesterday. And just FYI, now I said that. The feedback section we're recording on Sunday. We recorded the rest of it on Saturday, the 8th of July. So this, we're actually recording the same day as recording episode 4. Anyway, but we talked a little bit about that, but I don't know if that's how you mean, with, the 60s and with this whole time stream thing and whatnot and confusion. I'm still confused by it. I should say I'm not really confused by it. I'm concerned about it. It's just, it muddies the waters a lot. So, that's my take on it. Anyway.
Yep.
You have anything else you want to elaborate on?
I do not, sir.
All right. Well, we didn't get any other feedback, so we can just go into our own notes. And I only have one thing that I put down, and that was in trying to when I saw the episode for the first time and I saw the credits, I saw that Sarah was played by Adelaide Kane. I was like, oh, is that any relation to Carol Kane? Especially when in the credits, Carol's name showed up. And then right after that, Adelaide Kane. And I thought, well, is that her daughter or niece or something like that? And of course, no, it's not. In fact, she is an Australian actress. I think she's best known for being in the TV show Rain, which I don't really know anything about. I don't really watch CW stuff too much. The only show I really watched on CW was the 100. But aside from that, not really much of anything on that network. Do you have any other notes or anything you want to discuss?
Not on that.
Okay. Spot the references. A couple things. I know that the episode name, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. One thing I found is that there is a novel called Tomorrow, and Tomorrow, and Tomorrow, written by Gabrielle Zevin. And interestingly enough, that was named the best novel of 2022 by Amazon. And it has been optioned by Paramount for movie rights.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that played into the name or if it is its tie in Shakespeare. That I believe it's Macbeth.
Well, in fact, I've got it pulled up, and if you'll let me, there's another surprise in that quote, and it is from Macbeth.
Yeah.
And it goes, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools this way to dusty death. Out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So they pulled that from one of the most quoted Shakespeare blocks from Macbeth.
Yeah.
And for editorial content, apparently it's also another title from another Star Trek episode.
And that is something that Khan says in The Wrath of Khan, that the part of that, it is a tale told by an idiot. So you can find
sound and fury.
Yeah.
Signifying nothing. Yep.
Yeah. So that probably played into it as well, knowing that, Khan played into this and was actually in this episode.
So that block of Shakespeare has gotten a lot of mileage from Star Trek.
Yeah, it sure has. Beyond that, I was hoping to get to look at the stuff for this episode and spot the references, and I didn't get to do it today. So I guess I'll go off the top of my head, and you can help me with that as well. If there's anything else that was mentioned. Of course, we see internally, Pelia, and we had seen her, mentioned in the first episode, the Broken Circle. Of course, we didn't know that she was an engineer, or not an engineer in this timeline, or this time frame, I should say. Also, of course, the references to Canada.
There's kind of a deep diving nugget with Pelia as well.
Yeah.
So in amongst her art collection, you see a painting that's apparently a famous Vermeer that was stolen at some point and has never been recovered.
And that's the one that she has?
Yep. So it's like she has a famous stolen artwork in her collection of things. And that's sort of why the comment she made about the Louvre calling sort of fits in, because apparently when this Vermeer was stolen, everybody's been looking for it for some time. One of the great unsolved art thefts of the 20th century.
So Pelia was the one who stole it.
Well, we don't know that. We just know Pelia is the one that has it.
Right. What else? So,
well, like you said, lots of Canada.
We have the Enterprise. That is the UEF Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
Would have loved to have seen an exterior of it showing that. We see Ortegas still wearing a red shirt, but in a different position. Not the helmsman. We see Uhura there, in the same position. we don't see who his first officer is. I would be curious to know who it was. What else?
Well, you mentioned it before. Spock as the captain of the Vulcan ship.
Right. I know there has been talk about doing a Lake Ontario bridge, but I don't believe that has actually ever gotten off the ground. So, but there've been, discussion about like doing a bridge from downtown Toronto, across to a few things, either going across into, what they call the Golden Horseshoe into, St. Catharines, or even going into like, New York State, but I don't believe that was anything that ever really got off the ground. So I just was looking it up because I remember hearing something about it, but there was nothing that ever happened.
Well, and of course, another spot the reference is we had 2 shots of a Romulan bird of prey.
Yes, we did.
The one from the fuzzy UFO picture, and then the other one from the clear as a bell. This is a Romulan bird of prey picture.
Yes, exactly.
And when Sarah was shot, she used the leave no trace collapsomatic technology that we saw the Zhat Vash agents use in Picard.
Yeah, and I wonder if she was a Zhat Vash or Tal Shiar. They didn't really get into that. That would have been a nice tie-in as well, but we didn't get that. All right. Unless you have something else, I'd say...
I have nothing else, sir.
Let's move on. Do our shipwide announcements. All right. Well, we have some new Parrot Analytics information. So for Parrot Analytics, they finally released some information based on the week that Strange New Worlds premiered. In the week of June 10th to June 16th, Star Trek Strange New Worlds was number 6 in the Parrots for digital originals, with a 33.4 times the demand of an average show, which puts them into exceptional territory.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you have to be at 32 times to make exceptional. And that's great. So, in terms of the last 30 days, it is registering a 32.9 times the demand of an average show, which puts it in the top 0.2% of all shows in this market. So that's really good, with an increase in demand of 50.2%, putting it also in the 99th percentile of action adventure shows. All right. So we do have some additional news, but we will cover that for episode 4. To submit your theories and feedback, go to talkthroughmedia.com/feedback, where you can submit text or audio. Call 216-232-6146 and leave a voicemail. You can email us at strangenewworlds@talkthroughmedia.com, or you can, like most people, post in our designated episode thread in our Facebook group, which is at facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Star Trek TTM.
If you'd like to support the podcast, you can like our page on Facebook. That's facebook.com/talkthroughmedia. And while you're there, you can write us a review. You can share us on Facebook and retweet us on Twitter, especially when we post that a new episode is out. You can subscribe to the Talk Through Media YouTube channel, which is where you'll find our newest episodes first. You can subscribe to us in Apple Podcasts or the podcast client of your choice. And while you're there, give us a rating or review. You can also go to podchaser.com, where you can rate and review the podcast and even individual episodes. And finally, the best way to help us keep things going is to support us via our Patreon. And we would like to thank all of our Patreon supporters: Jeff Lorenzen, Andrew Davis, Morning Pace, Mike Johnson, Robert Kaiser, Jeff Gentry, Kevin Lyle, Michael Carrier, Kim Vogley, Kyle McAdams, James Robbins, and me.
And just an FYI, I won't highlight it, but one of the Patreons, your card is not working right now. So please take a look and make sure that you still have access. So
check your payment method.
Yes. All of the podcasts within the Talk Through Media network can be found on the Talk Through Media all-inclusive feed, which includes the Rebinged DS9 podcast, the Star Trek Discovery podcast, which you may be hearing this on. Of course, this podcast, which is the Star Trek Strange New Worlds Talk Through, and the Walking Dead Talk Through. And Kyle, LT, and I are continuing the Walking Dead Talk Through. And currently we are going through the new series, The Walking Dead Dead City. This is episode 4 tonight, I believe, of that. And so we're covering that as well. So if you miss Kyle, you can hear him on there. Our next episode is Season 2, Episode 4, which is titled Among the Lotus Eaters. And that is written by, hold on a second.
It was written by Kirsten Beyer and Davey Perez.
Yes, Kirsten Beyer and Davey Perez, who are both co-executive producers on this show. It is directed by Eduardo Sanchez, which I have something to say about him next episode. The description from ParamountPlus.com is returning to a planet that dredges up tragic memories. Captain Pike and his landing party find themselves forgetting everything, including their own identities, as he confronts a ghost from his past. And we have already seen that episode, and we will be talking about it in a few minutes. So until next time, I'm Brian.
And I'm LT.
Peace and long life.
Live long and prosper.